Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to Conversation in the Summer about something that I often see that happens during the summer, and that's the slow fade. Monday on Memorial Day, as the summer began, we introduced the idea of what the slow fade is. Yesterday, we talked about why that happens. We said sometimes it happens because of the time of year that we're in has a lot of external stimuli, and sometimes it happens because of the negative emotions in our heart, and we don't know how to deal with that. And sometimes it happens because we just got distracted and we had nothing to bring us back. That's why it happened. Today, I want to talk about when it happens. When does the slow fade happen? And that slow fade is going to happen. 3 things that we're going to unpack today. Number 1, just in the calendar, some things I just want to share with you to be on guard with the calendar. Number 2, it happens when you and I are out of rhythm. And then the third time that it's going to happen is when you and I are vulnerable. So let's unpack those 3 things today. The slow fade happens when, at different points of the year, I think it happens more often. I have seen the slow fade happen more consistently, certainly in the Easter season. Easter just gives us a different feel than Lent does. Again, for many Catholics, Lent's the time of year where they're more focused than ever. And then what happens for Easter is, well, they don't have to do their Lenten penance. And so they gave up chocolate or Coke, and then all of a sudden on Easter Sunday, they eat the amount of chocolate and drink the amount of Coke that they would have drank in the entire Lenten season, right? We all have done that, right? So what happens is we give ourselves permission to splurge, and then we don't know how to stop the splurge, right? We give ourselves permission to relax the discipline that we were disciplined with during Lent, but we don't turn the discipline back on, right? Easter is one of those times where it's kind of a liturgical season that's kind of hard to wrap our minds around. For many Catholics, you can touch Lent, right? You can touch sin, you can see it. But the resurrection, Easter, the Holy Spirit, for many people, it's very difficult to see and touch and wrap your mind around. So it just, at the time of year, Easter, I think a lot of people begin to fade. Certainly the summer is a time where I think a lot of us fade. This is going to be connected to point number 2, when we're out of rhythm. But the summer is a time, that's the when, that I think many of us are susceptible to the slow fade. And then the third time of year that I find that people are susceptible to the slow fade is in the holidays. Whether it's starting with Thanksgiving or whether it's going to be something more particular to December, I just think the Christmas holidays are a time where, because of all types of reasons, the amount of physical indulgence, the amount of materialism that is in our consciousness, we are naturally distracted out of something that's distinctly spiritual and into something that's just very earthly. Now, some of that's good, right? Time with family and things like that. But I just think we're susceptible to a fade at that time of year. So the when does the slow fade happen? Those are the 3 times a year that I have seen people are more susceptible. Number 2, when we're out of rhythm. When you and I are out of our ordinary rhythm, we are going to be susceptible to kind of fading away from God. Maybe you're out of rhythm on a daily basis. Maybe the circumstances of life have changed and you were praying every day at this time or every other day at this time, and people are in your house and they're throwing things off. Or you had a bad day at work and it kind of threw you off. Or you had to travel like you do during the summer. But when we're out of rhythm, it throws off the rhythm. And when things in our rhythm get thrown off, we tend to sacrifice or tend to lose the things that are hardest for us to touch. When I'm out of rhythm, I don't miss a meal. When I'm out of rhythm, I don't miss a shower. When I'm out of rhythm, I don't miss the physical things that I need to physically exist. But sometimes you can't touch prayer. And so when we're out of rhythm, human instinct is we grab the things that we can touch, and we often lose the things that we can't touch. So when we're out of rhythm during the holidays, when there's a lot of people around us and our days are different, When we're out of rhythm, like on the weekends. Our weekday rhythm is very different than our weekend rhythm for many people, right? Our meals are different on the weekends. Our sense of socializing is different on the weekends. Your daily order of life is thrown off because you don't have to go to work, or you don't have the daily rhythm of daily mass or the other things that many of us do, right? When we're out of rhythm, right? Could be a daily rhythm, a weekend rhythm, certainly in a Sunday rhythm. That's why I think that the summer is such a time of vulnerability for people, because you're traveling on the weekends, and it's easy as you're in travel and vacation mode to kind of vacation from the rest of the world and say, I'll get to mass later, right? So whatever it is, that's just the ordinary things that happen. But when you're out of rhythm, what happens is we're susceptible to the slow fade. And then the third time that we are susceptible to the slow fade is when we're vulnerable. When we are vulnerable, we are more susceptible to temptation. Temptation comes in three primary ways: in what we think, in what we feel, or in what we want. Temptation is going to come to us in three very distinct ways. It's not magic. Here we go. You're going to be tempted in the way that you think. You're going to be tempted in the way that you feel, or you're going to be tempted in what you crave or what you want. That's usually what people focus on. But our temptations and our thoughts and our feelings are equally as important, if not even more important, than what we crave or we grasp at, right? When we're vulnerable, we're thrown off, we're susceptible to temptation. I'll give you some examples there. How many of us were interiorly vulnerable during COVID-19? Well, a lot of people were, right? Not only, let's now connect all the dots today, was the when thrown off, right? Because we got hit during Lent. Then came Easter. A lot of us in COVID-19, if we were even remotely still connected to discipline in Lent, by the time Easter came and the disappointment of the stay-at-home order not being lifted, and it's Easter, it was a time of year that we were vulnerable. Number two, our rhythm was thrown off. How many of us had a different rhythm during COVID? Right? Either because you were working from home, or because you had to stay at home, or because of the other circumstances of your kids being at home for school, or tension in the house because of everybody being together. For many of us, COVID was an awesome experience, praise God. But for all of us, COVID kind of threw off our rhythm. And when we're out of rhythm, we are vulnerable to a slow fade. However, when we are vulnerable, when we don't like where we are in life, when we're struggling emotionally, when we're just going through a tough time just with life, we are vulnerable, which a lot of us were for COVID, weren't we? Angry at, I can't do this, or feeling the frustration of the stay at home, or the walls are getting in. I just want to bust out. I'm tired of wearing masks. I can't go do the things I used to do. Ordinary human emotions. I felt them too, right? But when we're vulnerable, right? That's vulnerability, what I just described to you. We're more susceptible to temptation. So the way that we think when we're vulnerable, right? When we're tempted, negative thoughts kind of go through our mind. Our feelings, right? A sense of frustration and impatience, and then we get tempted to either grasp at things like sin, or we get tempted to not do things like sloth. Right? So whatever it looks like in your own life, when we're vulnerable, right? That's when the slow fades, for many of us, is already happening. So it's just important for us to kind of wrap our minds around the when in your life. Maybe the slow fade happens in your life during that time of year, right? It's Easter in the summer, and it's the holidays. And if that's when it is for you, if that's the when, well, then now you know how to prepare, right? Which is where we're going to go the rest of the week. Number two, maybe for you, it's not necessarily the time of the year. It's just in times where you find yourself out of rhythm. Maybe it is the summer because you're out of rhythm, or maybe it's when you travel because you're out of rhythm. Whenever you're having guests with you because you're out of rhythm. When are you out of rhythm? And when you're out of rhythm, whether it's ordinarily on the weekends versus the weekdays, or different during times of year, well, then that's when you know you have to prepare. Or are you more susceptible to when you're vulnerable, when you're being tempted? when you're struggling. And if that's when you are perhaps most vulnerable to the temptation, when you're vulnerable, then you need to be aware of that so you can prepare. Knowing when it happens today and knowing why the fade happens, which was yesterday, helps us be on guard with it happening, which is what we introduced Monday. As we continue the rest of the week, we're going to begin to talk about what can you do. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how to prepare for those seasons well. And on Friday, we're going to talk about the need for having people hold us accountable. And then as we jump into some conversation next week, we'll continue to talk about practical things you can do in the fade to jumpstart things. Speaking of tomorrow, today is our last video version of the podcast. We're going to continue the podcast, but as I mentioned to you on Memorial Day, as well as yesterday, I've got some change coming in my life, and as change happens in my life, I want to make sure that I am able to serve you more consistently. And we've just made a decision to pause the video delivery of the form of the podcast, but we're going to continue the audio. In fact, we're going to deliver that right to you instead of just posting it on Facebook or having it on Anchor. We're going to actually deliver it straight to you. If you want to have the audio only version of the podcast delivered to you, either by email or by text message, go to my blog, marktoops.com, and you can sign up and have tomorrow's podcast delivered to you. So again, this is the last time that we'll have the video version on Facebook. If you are interested in continuing to walk with the podcast, go to my blog, marktoops.com, and sign up for it to be delivered to you by email or by text message. Of course, it'll continue to be on Anchor and populated in lots of different places like iTunes or Spotify or things like that. But make sure that you sign up so that we can make sure that it gets to you. It's been a real joy being with you in the video format. It's been great talking about the slow fade because it's huge in our life. And as we anticipate a new format for the podcast tomorrow, ask those questions about when it happens in your life. And as we continue to walk through the slow fade, God bless you.